The signpost leaned like a weary sentinel at the edge of the forest, its faded lettering barely legible under the weight of years. Crystal Pines. Once, that name had conjured memories of sunlit summers, of laughter echoing through the trees, of ghost stories whispered around a crackling fire. Now, as our two cars wound down the overgrown dirt road, the air felt thick with something heavier than nostalgia. There were 8 of us: Max, Jenna, Lisa, Alex, Ben, Rachel, Sarah, and me, returning to the cabin where we'd grown up, where we'd been kings and queens of our own wild kingdom. But as the cabin came into view, nestled among towering pines that seemed to lean closer than they should, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were trespassing on something ancient, something that had been waiting for us to return. "Do you remember the summer of '05? Jenna's voice broke the silence in the car, her eyes glinting with mischief in the rearview mirror. "When we nearly burned the cabin down trying to make s'mores indoors?" Laughter erupted, a fragile shield against the quiet that pressed in from the forest outside. I smiled, but the memory felt distant, like a photograph faded at the edges. We'd been wild then, untamed, our days filled with the reckless freedom of youth. Now, as we pulled up to the cabin, that freedom seemed a lifetime away. The cabin hadn't changed, and yet it had. It was a rustic structure, its logs aged to a deep, weathered gray, the roof sloping unevenly under the weight of countless winters. A brick chimney, overgrown with ivy that snaked like veins across the stone, jutted from one side. The front door, once a vibrant red, was peeling, its color muted to a dull crimson, though it still beckoned with a creaking promise of welcome. The blue window shutters had faded to a patchy gray, the wood beneath exposed and splintering. The path leading to the door, once manicured with flagstones, was now a tangle of tall grass and weeds, the stones swallowed by the earth. Vines climbed the cabin's walls in a chaotic lattice, their tendrils curling like fingers reaching for something unseen. The porch was more dilapidated than I remembered, one of its wooden planks still loose, just as it had been when we were kids. The swing tied to the big oak tree hung by a frayed rope, its wooden seat crumbling, ready to disintegrate at the slightest touch. Nature had reclaimed this place. The forest pressed in close, the pines towering like silent judges, their branches casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. There was an isolation here I didn't remember from childhood, a quiet that felt loaded, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant, mournful calls of forest creatures. As I stood there, taking it all in, I felt the weight of time, of the years that had passed, of the memories that had once made this place ours. But now it belonged to something else. Max was the first to move, pushing open the red door. It groaned in protest, the rusty hinges shrieking as a cloud of dust billowed out, catching the fading light. We waited a moment, letting the stale air escape, then followed him inside, one by one. The interior was a time capsule, frozen in the amber of our past. Warm wooden walls were decorated with faded family photos, smiling faces from summers long gone, and random antiques that had always seemed to hold secrets we were too young to understand. Mismatched furniture, each piece a relic of a summer past, filled the space. A sagging couch with a patchwork quilt, a rocking chair that creaked even when no one sat in it, a coffee table scarred with the initials we'd carved one rainy afternoon. The smell of aged wood mingled with the sharp tang of pine from the forest outside, a scent that should have been comforting but instead felt oppressive, like the air itself was holding its breath. Our old rooms were just as we'd left them, filled with the ghosts of our younger selves. I picked up a comic book from my bedside table, its pages yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but still legible. The bunk beds creaked under our weight, the same protesting groan they'd always made. There was a comfort in the familiarity, a sense of coming home, and as we began to unpack, the cabin slowly came alive. The crackle of the fireplace filled the air, the sound of laughter echoing off the walls, the soft strumming of Alex's guitar as he unpacked it from his bag. Lisa and Jenna busied themselves in the kitchen, the aroma of cooking food wafting through the cabin, a promise of warmth and normalcy. Later, we gathered in the living room, our old meeting spot, the room lit by the soft glow of the fire, the sound of music and clinking glasses weaving through our conversations. Seeing them all again was like stepping into an old photograph. Each of us a little older, a little changed, but still ourselves. Max, our unofficial leader, had filled out over the years. His once messy hair now tamed and slicked back, though his easy confidence remained. Jenna, the most adventurous of us, still had her fiery red hair. Her freckles faded, but her smile as infectious as ever, capable of lighting up even the darkest room. Lisa carried a quiet grace, a strength that had always held us together during our wildest adventures. Alex perched on the armrest of the couch, his long hair falling over his shoulders as his fingers deftly plucked at the guitar strings, the notes weaving through our reminiscences. Ben and Rachel, the inseparable duo we teased mercilessly as kids, were now married, their synchrony and unspoken understanding as strong as ever. And Sarah, now a successful novelist, her love for stories turned into a career, her eyes bright with the same curiosity that had always defined her. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange. As darkness began to shroud the cabin, we gathered around the fire pit outside, the firewood crackling as flames danced into the twilight, casting a warm glow that flickered across our faces. Alex, seated across from me, prodded at the fire with a stick, the light reflecting off his thoughtful expression. "You know, I almost didn't come," he admitted, his gaze locked on the flames. "Thought it would be, I don't know, too different." Lisa gave him a reassuring smile. "But it's not, right? We're the same." "Yeah," Alex responded, attempting to mirror her smile, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice that set my nerves on edge. As the night stretched on, the cabin filled with our laughter and chatter. We shared stories of our past, drank like teenagers sneaking alcohol for the first time, and sang songs that had once been the anthems of our youth. It was a beautiful reliving of the past, almost perfect, almost like the old times. But beneath the warmth of shared memories, there was a nagging unease I couldn't shake. The woods around us, once a place of adventure and exploration, carried a different air now, one of anticipation. The silence of the forest felt loaded, as though it was waiting. But waiting for what, I couldn't say. The night stretched on, our laughter fading into the stillness, replaced by the sounds of the forest. I caught a glimpse of Alex as he rose from his seat. "I need some fresh air," he announced, wandering off into the darkness. We didn't think much of it at first, but after an hour, a sense of unease began to settle over us. Max finally stood, his voice echoing the worry I'd been trying to suppress. "He's been gone too long." Jenna nodded, her face set with determination. "We need to look for him. He can't have gone far." There was a collective nod of agreement, our light-hearted reunion taking on a more serious undertone. With flashlights in hand and our hearts heavy with concern, we split into pairs. Max and Sarah, Jenna and Ben, Rachel and I. The forest was different at night. The gentle rustle of leaves replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional stir of a night creature. The soft glow of our flashlights pierced the darkness as we called out Alex's name, our voices echoing through the trees. "Alex, where are you?" Jenna's voice carried a note of desperation, our worry intensifying with each passing minute. Rachel and I trekked deeper into the woods, our flashlights sweeping over moss-covered trees and tangled underbrush. "Alex, if you can hear us, please respond," I called, trying to keep my voice steady, but our calls were met with silence, the forest swallowing our words. It felt as though the trees themselves were watching, their branches curling like skeletal fingers in the dim light. After what felt like hours, we returned to the cabin, each pair carrying the same news. No sign of Alex. As the first rays of morning light peeked through the cabin windows, casting long shadows on the wooden floor, we'd all but given up hope. The absence of Alex hung heavy in the air, the cabin, once filled with joy and nostalgia, feeling empty without him. Our worry was morphing into panic when the door creaked open. We all turned, and there, backlit by the rising sun, was Alex. But the relief that washed over us was short-lived. There was something noticeably different about him. His usually vibrant eyes were distant, as if looking at something far away, his face strangely impassive. "Alex, where the hell were you?" Max demanded, the relief evident in his voice. "We've been searching all night." Alex shrugged, not meeting Max's eyes. "Got lost, I guess." "Got lost?" Jenna scoffed, crossing her arms. "You know these woods better than anyone." "Yeah, well?" Alex's voice trailed off, his gaze distant, lost in thoughts we couldn't reach. "You had us worried, Alex," Lisa said softly, concern lacing her words. "Are you feeling all right?" He gave her a small nod. "Yeah, just tired." "You sure you're okay, man?" Ben asked, squinting at Alex as if trying to figure him out. "Yeah," Alex responded, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. "I said I'm fine." His sharp tone sent a hush over the group. It was unusual for Alex to snap. We exchanged glances, our confusion and worry reflected in each other's eyes. "All right, let's give Alex some space," I said, attempting to diffuse the tension. "We're all tired. Let's get some breakfast going." Reluctantly, the others nodded, and we moved toward the kitchen, leaving Alex standing by the doorway. As I took one last glance at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't the Alex we knew. Alex's strange behavior became increasingly evident. He sat apart from us during breakfast, his plate largely untouched. The Alex we knew would have been in the middle of it all, cracking jokes, laughing, but this Alex was silent, his gaze vacant. After breakfast, we decided to hike down to the river, a spot where our younger selves had spent countless hours swimming and indulging in carefree adventures. I could almost hear the echoes of our laughter, see the ghosts of our past selves splashing in the water. Alex had always been the most enthusiastic, the first to dive in, his joyous yell echoing off the trees as he plunged into the cool water, surfacing with a wide grin, beckoning us to join him. But today, he remained on the riverbank, his eyes fixed on the water's surface, a deep frown etched on his face. "Hey, Alex, you coming in?" I called, trying to infuse cheerfulness into my voice, hoping to pull him out of his somber mood. He barely glanced at me, shaking his head. "No, I'm good here." His voice was distant, detached, as if he were miles away. His apathy, his sudden isolation, felt so out of character that it sent a ripple of unease through me. It was as if he were a pale imitation of the vibrant personality he once was. On the hike back to the cabin, Alex fell behind, his steps slow and measured. In the past, he'd have been at the center of every conversation, his laughter ringing through the woods, but today he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. When spoken to, he offered quick, curt responses, each word dragged out of him. There was a hollow look in his eyes, a lack of emotion that was downright unnerving. It was like watching a familiar movie with all the color drained out. The scenes were the same, the characters were the same, but everything felt lifeless, disconnected. The hike back was quiet, our group noticeably subdued, each of us silently acknowledging the chilling change in our friend. Later that night, as nightfall descended on the cabin, we gathered around the fireplace, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on our worried faces. Alex, still distant and withdrawn, barely spoke, his eyes vacant, lost in some unspoken thought. Jenna and Max prepared dinner in the kitchen, the rest of us settling in the living area, the mood significantly quieter than the previous night. The laughter and stories had been replaced with whispered conversations and anxious glances. Lisa tried to lighten the mood, but her efforts were met with strained smiles. After dinner, Lisa volunteered to wash up, vanishing into the kitchen. We tried to keep the conversation going, to return to the jovial atmosphere of our reunion, but it was like trying to tune a radio to a frequency that no longer existed. As the minutes stretched into hours, we realized Lisa hadn't returned. At first, we assumed she was taking her time, perhaps finding solace in the routine of washing dishes. But as more time passed, a familiar knot of worry formed in our stomachs. "Where's Lisa?" Sarah finally voiced our collective concern, her eyes wide with worry. "I'll go check on her," I said, rising from my seat. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, claustrophobic, the walls seeming to close in. I found the kitchen empty, the dishes piled neatly on the rack, the light from the single bulb casting long shadows on the floor, but no sign of Lisa. "Lisa!" I called, my voice echoing in the empty room. A heavy silence greeted me. I moved toward the kitchen's back door, finding it slightly ajar, a cool night breeze wafting in. Lisa wouldn't have gone out alone, would she? Not after what happened with Alex. My heart hammered in my chest as I returned to the living area, the worried faces turning toward me, their expressions mirroring my fear. "She's not there," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. A shared look of fear passed among us. Not again. We couldn't be going through this again. But the empty kitchen stood as a reminder of the reality we were facing. Lisa was missing, and we were trapped in a nightmarish replay of last night. With flashlights in hand and worry clawing at our hearts, we spread out to search for Lisa. The forest, usually a place of nostalgic memories, now seemed alien, each tree casting ominous shadows in the weak glow of our flashlights. "Lisa!" Ben called, his voice echoing in the stillness. We followed suit, our voices ringing out into the night, the only answer the distant hooting of an owl, its call piercing the eerie silence. We searched through the woods, our boots crunching on the undergrowth, the beams from our flashlights slicing through the darkness. But there was no sign of Lisa, no footprints, no trace of where she might have gone. After a couple of hours of fruitless searching, Max suggested we head back to the cabin. "She might have returned while we were out," he reasoned, though his voice lacked conviction. We nodded, albeit reluctantly, and trudged back, a sense of defeat hanging heavy in the air. As the cabin came into view, its windows glowing dimly in the darkness, a sliver of hope ignited within us. Perhaps Lisa was back, safe and sound, just as Alex had been. But stepping inside, we were met with the same unnerving silence, the same empty spaces. Alex sat by the fireplace, seemingly undisturbed by Lisa's disappearance. He glanced at us as we stepped in, his eyes hollow, the mask of indifference firmly in place. It was chilling to see him so disengaged, so unlike the Alex we'd known. The rest of the night was a blur of anxious pacing and hushed conversations. We took turns keeping watch, hoping Lisa would walk through the door, safe and unharmed. As the sun peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the cabin, the front door creaked open. Lisa stepped through, her face impassive, her eyes vacant. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly replaced by unease. "Lisa!" Sarah exclaimed, rushing to her. But Lisa didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, she walked past us as if we weren't there, her clothes dirty, leaves tangled in her hair, yet she didn't seem bothered by it. It was as though she were in a trance, oblivious to her surroundings. My heart sank. The same vacant stare, the same distant demeanor, just like Alex. "Lisa, where were you?" I asked, stepping in front of her. She stopped, her gaze focusing on me, but there was no recognition in her eyes, no familiarity. It was as if she were looking right through me. "I was out," she replied, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "But where?" "We were worried. We searched for you all night," Jenna interjected, her voice shaky. Lisa merely shrugged, stepping around me to continue toward her room. As she passed Alex, they shared a glance, something fleeting but filled with a strange understanding. It was a silent interaction that sent a shiver down my spine. The rest of us exchanged worried glances. It was happening again. As Lisa disappeared into her room, shutting the door behind her, we were left standing in the common area, a heavy silence settling around us. The air felt thick with unspoken fear. The reality of our situation hit us harder than before. Whatever was happening, it wasn't a mere coincidence, not fatigue or stress. It was something beyond our understanding, something terrifying. The day dragged on with a growing sense of dread. Our group, once filled with laughter and shared memories, now divided by an undercurrent of fear and suspicion. It was clear to us all. Alex and Lisa were not the friends we'd known. There was something else, something terrifying. Later in the day, we huddled in the relative safety of the kitchen, keeping our voices low, our eyes fixed on the closed door that separated us from the entities that wore our friends' faces. Ben was the first to break the silence, holding his left arm up, his fingers tracing a spot on the inside of his forearm. "Have any of you noticed this?" he whispered, looking around at us. "Both Alex and Lisa have this cut on their left arm, right here." His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and urgency. He didn't need to explain for us to understand the gravity of his observation. The air in the room seemed to grow colder as the implication sank in. Our eyes met across the room, each of us reflecting the horror felt by the other. Jenna put a hand over her mouth, her eyes glassy with terror. Max swore under his breath, running a shaky hand through his hair. "The exact same spot," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "The same size. That can't be a coincidence." "It's not," Max agreed. "It's connected to whatever happened to them. It must be." Suddenly, our friends' transformations seemed even more ominous. The identical cuts, the similar behavior, everything pointed to a single, horrifying conclusion. Whatever was happening to them was methodical, almost surgical. With a mix of terror and determination gnawing at our insides, we decided to confront them. We made our way to the living area, where Alex and Lisa sat in the corner, their backs against the wall, their eyes devoid of any familiar warmth. "What happened to your arms?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended, breaking the cabin's silence. All eyes were on them now, on the identical cuts adorning their left arms. Alex glanced at Lisa, a strange, silent understanding passing between them. Their eyes then returned to us, and it felt like we were looking into an abyss. "It was nothing," Alex said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Just a small accident." "Yeah," Lisa chimed in, her voice flat. "Nothing to worry about." "But they're identical," Ben interjected, his voice shaking. "Identical cuts, same spot, same size. That's not a coincidence." "Are you implying something, Ben?" Lisa asked, her eyes narrowing, and something in her voice sent a chill down my spine. "Yeah, that you're not who you say you are," Sarah retorted, her voice filled with conviction. Then their features began to shift, their faces blurring as if seen through rippled glass. A wave of disgust rolled over us as their bodies twisted and contorted, reshaping into something that vaguely resembled our friends but was completely alien. A gasp echoed through the room as we stumbled backward, our worst fears confirmed. The creatures in front of us were no longer our friends but monstrous parodies wearing their skins. We were facing shape-shifting creatures, and we were trapped in a cabin with them. Fueled by a surge of fear and adrenaline, we scrambled away, tripping over furniture, scrambling up the stairs and into a room, slamming the door shut. We pushed a heavy dresser against it, panting heavily as we pressed our bodies against the cold wood. The harsh reality of our situation crashed into us like a tidal wave. We were trapped with creatures that not only murdered their victims, but replicated them in horrifying detail. Survival now hinged on escape. In the midst of the chaos, Jenna, pale and shaky, pulled an old newspaper clipping from a dust-covered book on the shelf. Her trembling hands smoothed out the worn paper, her eyes scanning the faded print before she began to read aloud, her voice wavering but clear. "Local cabin owners mysteriously disappear," she read, the headline echoing in the tense silence. She continued, "Harold and Agnes McClary, longtime residents and owners of the much-loved wilderness cabin, have been reported missing. Last seen by their neighbors 3 weeks ago. Their sudden disappearance has left the small community shocked and confused. Local authorities have found no sign of forced entry or struggle at the cabin, and their car remains parked outside the house." She flipped the clipping over, revealing a smaller article on the back. "Cabin curse legends resurface with recent disappearances," she read, taking a shaky breath. "The recent disappearances have stirred up old tales among the locals. Legends speak of a sinister entity residing in the surrounding woods. They describe a shapeshifter that feeds on humans, absorbing their essence and assuming their form. The tale of the cabin curse, as it's known among locals, is as old as the hills around us, and while it may be the stuff of campfire stories, The eerie parallels with the McClary's disappearance cannot be ignored. She set the clipping down, the room falling silent except for our ragged breaths. The horrifying implications hung heavy in the air, chilling us to the bone. The cabin, the missing owners, the legends, it all lined up too perfectly with our current situation. The horrifying possibility stared us right in the face. We were living the nightmare the McClarys had possibly gone through. Had they, too, been replaced by these creatures, their identities stolen, their lives consumed by this monstrous entity? "We need to leave now," Max said, his voice cutting through the horrified silence, his eyes flashing with determination. He was right. If we didn't act, we, too, would be replaced by these monsters. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on us, the chilling words from the newspaper clipping echoing in our minds. We were running out of time, and we couldn't afford to wait for another one of us to disappear and be replaced. In a desperate bid for survival, we came up with a plan to confront the creatures. "We need to lure them into the basement," Ben proposed, his gaze firm. "Once they're down there, we lock them in. It's our best chance." We glanced at each other, the chilling realization sinking in. This was what it had come to, using one of us as bait to trap the monsters wearing our friends' faces. "I'll do it," Max said, his voice steady. The protests were immediate, but he quelled them with a look. "We don't have time. Let's do this." I nodded at the others, signaling for them to be quiet as I slowly turned the handle of the door we'd barricaded ourselves behind. The creaking hinges sounded like thunder in the quiet cabin, but I eased it open, praying the doppelgangers were nowhere near. The hallway was empty, eerily silent, sending a shiver down my spine. We stepped out one by one, our eyes constantly darting around, our breaths held in a mix of fear and anticipation. Max moved past us to the end of the hall, his hand poised above the basement door handle. Our plan was dangerous, using him as bait to lure the creatures into the basement. We crept toward him, the old wooden floor groaning and squeaking under our feet, making us wince each time. We were sitting ducks out here, far from the relative safety of the room we'd been in, and the awareness of it made my heart race. Finally, we reached the basement door. Max cast one last look at us, then descended, the ominous thud of the closing door echoing in the silent cabin. Now we waited, each second stretching into an eternity, the sound of our own heartbeats filling our ears. Then, out of the silence, came a crash from below, a sound so sudden that we all jumped. It was followed by a strangled cry. "Max!" My heart lurched in my chest. We were too late. Our plan to trap the creatures had instead led one straight to its next victim. The basement door flew open. Max stood at the top of the stairs, but there was something wrong. His eyes were distant, his movements strange and mechanical. The creature had outsmarted us, using our plan against us. It had taken Max. A chilling wave of realization washed over us. The friends we'd grown up with, shared countless memories with, had been replaced by these monstrous doppelgangers. "We need to fight," Jenna whispered, gripping the makeshift weapon in her hand tighter, armed with whatever we could find. A kitchen knife, a fireplace poker, a broken chair leg. We confronted our once friends. Their familiar faces were twisted into grotesque caricatures. I held the broken chair leg, positioning myself in front of Alex's doppelganger. His once kind eyes now glinted with an unnatural, predatory gleam. He lunged toward me with suddenness that left me reeling, but I managed to sidestep and bring the chair leg down on him. He recoiled but quickly recovered, swiping his arm at me. I blocked, feeling the jarring impact travel up my arms. Nearby, Jenna faced off with Lisa's doppelganger, armed with a fireplace poker. She was a whirlwind of motion, every swing precise, keeping the creature at bay. It lunged at her, but she sidestepped at the last moment, ramming the poker into its side. It screeched, the sound a terrible echo in the confined space, but Jenna stood her ground, her eyes blazing with determination. Ben had the most challenging task, facing off with Max's doppelganger. Max had always been the biggest among us, and his replica retained that formidable strength, but Ben, lighter and more agile, used that to his advantage. He wove around the creature's attacks, managing to land several hits with his kitchen knife, each stab slowing it down, even if just a bit. Slowly, bit by bit, we started to gain the upper hand. Jenna landed a solid blow on Lisa's doppelganger, knocking it to the ground. Ben managed to get in close, driving his knife deep into Max's doppelganger. I swung with all the strength I could muster, catching Alex's replica across the face. It stumbled, giving me the opening I needed. With a final, desperate effort, I brought the chair leg down on it, and it fell, joining the others on the floor. We stood, panting, our bodies shaking with exertion and the aftermath of adrenaline. Our makeshift weapons dropping from our hands, clattering on the wooden floor. The only way we can stop them is by burning the cabin. Max's voice? Ben's voice now, I corrected myself, trembled yet was resolute. His words echoed in the silence, and we exchanged wide-eyed glances. It sounded insane, yet, in our desperate situation, also incredibly sane. Once we agreed, we set into motion. Jenna and I crept into the kitchen, trying to keep our footsteps light, our breaths hushed. We found bottles of strong liquor in one of the cupboards, probably left behind from some previous reunion. We tore strips from the old curtains, soaking them in the liquor and creating makeshift Molotov cocktails. With one last glance toward the living room, we grabbed our crude weapons and left the cabin. Once we were back with the others, Ben took a deep breath and lit one of the cocktails. He lobbed the flaming bottle toward the cabin, and it arced in the air before crashing through a window. The explosion of flames was instantaneous, illuminating the forest around us in an angry orange glow. The fire caught, spreading quickly from one part of the cabin to another. Our hearts pounded as we watched the cabin turn into an inferno, trapping the monstrous creatures within. The forest was silent except for the crackling of the burning cabin, the flames roaring, leaping toward the starlit sky, consuming everything in their path. But as we started to retreat, a chilling sound reached our ears. A high-pitched, echoing wail emanated from the cabin. Our steps faltered, and we turned back toward the burning structure. There, silhouetted against the flames, we saw them. Alex, Lisa, and Max, or at least the monstrous copies of them. They were pounding on the windows, clawing at the doors, their distorted faces contorted in agony as they tried to escape the inferno. But the fire was relentless, the flames dancing higher, the heat intensifying, and we watched as the doppelgangers retreated from the windows, disappearing into the blazing interior. Their cries were soon drowned by the crackling of the fire. A chill ran down our spines, but we knew it was over. The creatures were trapped, unable to escape the fiery prison we'd condemned them to. The cabin burned, the fire reflecting in our wide, traumatized eyes, but we'd survived. As the creatures' cries faded away, a sense of relief washed over us. Cutting across the dewy grass, panting and trembling, we heard the distant wail of sirens, a sound that promised help and safety. Our hearts, running high on adrenaline and fear, found a momentary pause. The local authorities, drawn by the smoke of our desperate act, arrived, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Firefighters in heavy gear rushed to battle the cabin fire, their hoses raining down torrents of water. Local police, their faces twisted with confusion and concern, approached us with a flurry of questions we weren't ready to answer. We huddled together a safe distance from the burning cabin, our legs finally giving out beneath us. The ground felt cold against our skin, but we hardly noticed, our eyes locked on the fiery spectacle before us. "I can't believe we made it," Jenna murmured, her voice barely rising above the crackling of the fire and the distant siren's wail. It was a sentiment we all shared, a heavy truth we were just beginning to accept. Days later, as we left the site for the final time, the scorched remains of the cabin felt like a haunting ghost in our rearview mirror, a painful reminder of the horror we'd faced, the friends we'd lost. The cabin was behind us, its terrifying secrets reduced to ashes, and we were moving forward. But the memory of that night, of the creatures that had worn our friends' faces, lingered like a shadow, a reminder of the unseen things that lurk in the places we once called home. 20 years earlier, I'd taken a job as a fire lookout in the remote forests of California, a teenager eager to escape the mundane routines of everyday life. The idea of spending a summer perched high in a tower, surrounded by wilderness, seemed like the perfect adventure. I was young, restless, perhaps a bit naive, believing solitude would give me a clearer perspective on life, a chance to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. The tower was located in the Shasta Trinity National Forest, miles from the nearest town, a solitary wooden structure atop a hill, offering a panoramic view of the sprawling forest below. To get there, you had to navigate a narrow, winding road, barely more than a dirt trail, the dense foliage brushing against the sides of my old truck like soft whispers urging me to turn back. I'd found the job listing in a local newspaper, Fire Lookout Wanted. Must enjoy solitude. The requirements were minimal, a high school diploma and the ability to live in a remote location for an extended period. The pay wasn't great, but it promised food, accommodation, and, most importantly, solitude. I applied without a second thought and was surprised when I got a call for an interview. A week later, I was driving up to my new summer home, my truck loaded with supplies and a head full of romanticized notions about life in the wilderness. The job was straightforward. Keep an eye out for signs of forest fires and report them. I had a radio for communication, binoculars for observation, and a manual that covered the basics of fire lookout duties. I thought it would be an easy job, a peaceful summer spent reading books and enjoying nature. I was partially right, it was peaceful, at least at first. It didn't take long for me to realize that the tower and the forest it overlooked were far from ordinary. My first day on the job was filled with contrasting emotions. The excitement was palpable as I stepped into the fire lookout tower for the first time, but the monotony of the remote location quickly settled in. The view from up there was breathtaking, a sweeping panorama of trees, hills, and valleys. Being a fire lookout had always been something I wanted to do, the appeal lying in the solitude it offered, coupled with the sense of responsibility that came with the role. I was to be the eyes of the forest, the first line of defense against wildfires, an idea that filled me with purpose. The cabin inside the tower was modest but comfortable. There were shelves stocked with canned food, a first aid kit on the wall, an old worn-out rug on the wooden floor. A pair of binoculars rested on the windowsill, waiting to be used. The stove was old but functional, and next to it was a small refrigerator. A lantern hung from a hook on the ceiling, providing a warm yellow light that filled the room. But what drew my attention was an old, yellowed piece of paper tucked away in the top drawer of the wooden desk, almost hidden beneath a pile of maps and manuals. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it out. The handwriting was cramped, the ink faded, but it was still legible. The note began with a straightforward warning. To the new lookout, take these rules seriously. They are not a joke and are meant to keep you safe. The list of rules was peculiar. Don't ever shine your light toward the southwestern tree line. If you hear footsteps on the stairs, don't look to see who it is. Never answer any radio call that comes in after midnight. If you see a figure standing in the clearing during dusk, do not make eye contact. Keep all windows and doors locked between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. What were these rules about? Were they an inside joke among fire lookouts, a way to scare newbies like me? I chuckled at the absurdity of it all, folding the paper and returning it to the drawer. The thought crossed my mind to toss it in the trash, but something stopped me. Perhaps the weight of the unexplained, or a respect for the unknown elements of my new job. I shook off the feeling of unease. My role here was clear. Watch for signs of fire and report them immediately. I took a deep breath, looked out the window at the vast forest stretching as far as the eye could see, and reminded myself why I was here. This was my job, my responsibility, and I was ready to do it, regardless of any odd rules or unsettling feelings. Nightfall arrived faster than I expected, casting the forest into deep shadows. The sky was a blanket of stars, providing just enough light to outline the towering trees. The sounds of the night came alive. Crickets chirped in a constant rhythm. An occasional owl hooted in the distance. The air was cool, filled with the earthy scent of damp soil and foliage. Inside the tower, boredom set in. The radio sat silent on the desk, its static-filled quietude a testament to the uneventful nature of my shift. A small stack of outdated magazines lay beside it, their pages already turned, their stories consumed. The lantern overhead cast a warm glow on the wooden walls, filling the room with a soft yellow light. My eyes landed on the flashlight resting near the window, and the list of rules popped into my mind. I chuckled softly. Could shining a light really cause any harm? With that thought, I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it deliberately toward the southwestern tree line. My thumb pressed down on the switch, and the beam of light pierced the darkness. The instant the light touched the trees, a racket of unsettling noises erupted from the forest. A chaotic mix of growls, high-pitched shrieks, and the rustling of leaves, as though a multitude of creatures were suddenly roused. My heart started pounding, each beat echoing loudly in my ears. Was I hearing one animal, or multiple? My mind raced to identify the source. Were these the sounds of known forest animals, or something entirely different? My hand trembled as I switched off the flashlight. The noises ceased as suddenly as they had begun, plunging the forest back into its previous state of nocturnal serenity. I sat there, flashlight in hand, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My first thought was to rationalize it. Maybe it was just raccoons or a group of nocturnal birds startled by the light. But the intensity and variety of the sounds didn't fit that explanation. My curiosity was ignited, fueled by the enigma of the forest's reaction to a simple beam of light. The list of rules, previously a source of amusement, now gained a level of credibility I couldn't easily dismiss. After the flashlight incident, I sat back down, my fingers idly flipping through the pages of an old hunting magazine. But my mind kept drifting back to the drawer, to the list of rules. The sense of mystery surrounding the list was gnawing at me, a puzzle begging to be solved. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps climbing the wooden stairs to the tower broke the silence. My eyes instinctively darted toward the door. The rule about not looking sprang into my mind, clear as day. A battle raged within me. Curiosity screamed to check, while an inexplicable sense of caution urged me to heed the warning. In a moment of tense indecision, I gripped the arms of my chair, my knuckles turning white. I forced my eyes away from the door and stared at the radio, its dials and buttons suddenly the most interesting things in the room. The footsteps grew louder, heavier, each step sending a new wave of tension through my body. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. The ensuing silence was so intense it was almost tangible. My chest loosened, and I let out a sigh of relief I hadn't realized I was holding. Questions flooded my mind. What was making those footsteps? Why did they stop? And most importantly, why was it so crucial not to look? Time crawled by, each minute stretching longer than the last. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't refocus on my job. My eyes kept darting to the window, scanning the tree line as if expecting an answer to materialize. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. A shadow, larger and darker than any animal I could think of, moved between the trees. It was there for a split second, then vanished, swallowed by the darkness of the forest. My senses were on high alert. I strained my ears, picking up faint, unidentifiable sounds carried on the breeze. Sounds that resembled whispers more than any natural forest noise. My thoughts raced. Could this place be haunted? Was I in the territory of some dangerous, unidentified animal, or was it something else? Something that couldn't be easily categorized or explained. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as my imagination ran wild. The list of rules, once a curiosity, now felt like a lifeline I had foolishly ignored. The air in the room grew thicker, heavy with unanswered questions and a mounting sense of unease. What had I gotten myself into? The rest of the night was a blur of heightened senses and racing thoughts. I tried to busy myself with tasks, testing the radio, cleaning the countertops, sweeping the floor, but my eyes kept returning to the window, my ears straining for any out-of-place sounds. Around midnight, I decided to make some coffee, hoping the caffeine would keep me alert. As the aroma filled the cabin, I felt a slight sense of normalcy return. I sat down with my mug, relishing the warmth and bitterness, just as I was about to convince myself I'd imagined the weird events. Then the radio buzzed to life, static filling the room, followed by an incoherent voice. My heart sank as I remembered the rule about not answering radio calls after midnight. I looked at the clock. It was 12:05 a.m. Without touching the radio, the voice stopped, and the static died down. For the next couple of hours, nothing out of the ordinary happened. Maybe the coffee helped, or perhaps the absence of further strange occurrences calmed my nerves. Eventually, I felt my eyelids grow heavy. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 4 a.m. I remembered the rule about keeping doors and windows locked between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. A quick check confirmed they were secure. Feeling a sense of relief, I decided it was safe to catch a few hours of sleep. I lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, pulled the blanket over me, and sleep came surprisingly quickly. The first rays of morning light streamed through the window, pulling me from my slumber. I sat up, momentarily disoriented, before the events of the previous night came rushing back. A glance at the clock confirmed it was well past 6 a.m. I got up, stretched, and walked over to the window. The forest looked different in the daylight, less menacing, but still filled with secrets. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat down at the desk, the list of rules a constant reminder of the unknown. Despite the unsettling experiences, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. I was, after all, here for a job, a responsibility that included more than just watching for fires. As I looked out over the trees, bathed in the soft morning light, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of discovering something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. I dressed, put on my boots, and stepped outside to breathe in the fresh morning air. The forest was awake, alive with the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. I climbed the stairs back to the tower, ready to face another day and whatever mysteries it might hold. After an uneventful day, the events of the first night left a mix of caution and curiosity wrestling within me. The strange happenings were an undeniable warning, but my curiosity was too strong to ignore. Rather than leaving things to chance, I opted for a more organized method to delve into the mystery surrounding me. The idea of systematically testing each rule entered my thoughts. I rummaged through my bag and pulled out a journal I'd initially brought for nature sketches and observations. It was about to serve a very different, perhaps darker, role. The first rule was up. Don't ever shine your light toward the southwestern tree line. Though I'd already broken this rule, I felt a need to probe further. With my flashlight in one hand and the journal open on the table, I waited for the sun to sink below the horizon. When darkness engulfed the forest, I pointed the flashlight in the prohibited direction and clicked it on. The reaction from the forest was instantaneous, much like my first night, but with key differences. The strange symphony of noises erupted again, only this time the volume was amplified, almost as if filled with irritation or anger. The shadows, too, had changed. They moved in a frenzied manner, darting between the trees as if agitated by the light. These were not normal animal behaviors. Something else was at play here. I hastily scribbled down every detail in my journal, my hand barely keeping up with my racing thoughts, and switched off the flashlight. Having completed the first test, I found myself grappling with a blend of fear and fascination. The increasingly intense reactions from the forest were a clear sign I was meddling with forces I didn't understand, but I was intrigued. I needed to learn more. I took a deep breath and searched through my journal, the neat handwriting now a hurried scrawl, a testament to the growing tension. I was at a crossroads. Part of me wanted to halt the experiment, to respect the rules and the entity or entities they were designed to protect me from. Another part wanted answers, driven by a curiosity that had always defined me. Rule 2 dealt with the mysterious footsteps ascending the tower stairs. As the days passed, these occurrences became more frequent. Initially sporadic, maybe once a night, they became a regular event, sometimes happening multiple times in a single night. The sound was distinct, the slow, deliberate steps of what seemed to be a heavy-footed creature or person, as if whatever was climbing the stairs wanted to be heard. The rule's warning was unmistakable. Don't look. Something deep within my gut, an instinctual sense of caution beyond logic, underscored the importance of this rule. It was as if my subconscious communicated a primal fear, a dire warning not to break this guideline. Who or what was making those footsteps? The question was a splinter in my mind, gnawing at me each time the steps resumed their slow climb. The urge to peek was nearly overwhelming. Each time the footsteps began, my eyes would involuntarily dart toward the door, my heart pounding in anticipation. Could it be an animal, a person, or something else entirely? To resist the temptation, I developed coping mechanisms. The radio on the desk became my focal point. I'd stare at its dials and knobs, sometimes reaching out to touch them, as if the tactile sensation could anchor me in reality. At other times, I'd flip through my journal, rereading entries or doodling aimlessly, anything to distract my attention from the door. But my ears remained acutely tuned to the sound of each footstep, counting them as they ascended and then ceased. As the days went by, my journal filled with observations. The more rules I broke, the more active the creature became. Initially, I only caught glimpses of it through my binoculars, a shadowy figure that moved with incredible speed, making it hard to discern any features. Each time I saw it, it was closer to the tower than before. It was real. What was it, though, a guardian of the forest or something else? The creature began revealing itself more boldly as I continued breaking the rules. I remember the night I broke the rule about answering radio calls after midnight. A distorted voice came through, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. That was the night I saw the creature closer to the tower than ever before. I was scared out of my wits, but I also felt a sense of awe and wonder. I was witnessing something most people would never believe. Was it dangerous or just as curious about me as I was about it? Despite the escalating strangeness and potential danger, I felt like I was piecing together a complex puzzle. Each rule seemed to correlate with specific behaviors of the cryptid, almost as if the rules were set by the creature itself, or perhaps by previous fire lookouts who had observed its behavior. I wasn't the first to experience this. How many before me had known about this creature? Why wasn't this public knowledge? But as the creature got closer to the tower with each rule I broke, my sense of wonder gave way to dread. Was I poking the bear here? What if this creature was dangerous? The last straw was the night I kept the windows and doors unlocked between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., clearly breaking another rule. That night, the creature came so close to the tower that I could hear its heavy breathing. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. A few days later, the rule about not looking at whoever or whatever was ascending the stairs loomed over me like an ominous cloud. Among all the rules, this one held the most enigma, and if my gut feeling was accurate, the most potential for danger. Tonight's the night, I told myself. I'm going to break this rule. A complex mix of emotions settled within me. Dread at what I might discover, mixed with an odd excitement at finally unlocking the mystery. I took a deep breath. The timing seemed almost scripted. Just as I finalized my decision, the sound of footsteps began to resonate, each step deliberate, calculated, creaking under the weight of whatever entity was making its way up. It was as if the creature, too, had been waiting for this moment, for this confrontation. My heart thumped loudly in my chest, every beat sinking with each creak of the stairs. My eyes were drawn magnetically toward the door, the final barrier between me and the mystery I'd been probing. Weeks of rule-breaking, journal entries, and restless nights had led to this. It was time to meet the unknown face to face. My hand clenched into a fist, an unconscious act of preparing to defend myself, or perhaps a physical manifestation of my dwindling courage trying to hold on. The footsteps continued their slow ascent, growing louder, more defined, as they approached the top of the staircase. Each sound reverberated through the air, filling the room with a palpable sense of impending revelation. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for this singular moment of truth. The footsteps were now just one step away. I could feel my pulse in my throat, hear the blood rushing in my ears. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I turned my head to look, breaking the one rule I'd been most reluctant to violate. The door slowly creaked open, breaking the heavy silence. Before me stood the cryptid, a figure almost beyond description. It towered over me, clearly taller than any human I'd ever seen, its body a bizarre combination of fur and scales, as if nature couldn't decide what it should be. But what caught my attention most were its eyes. They glowed a soft, unsettling shade of blue that seemed to pierce the darkness. Despite its terrifying appearance, the creature made no aggressive moves. It simply stood there, locking eyes with me. For a heartbeat, it felt as if time had frozen, as if the universe paused to witness this unlikely meeting. We were two creatures from entirely different realms, brought together by circumstance and perhaps curiosity. It wasn't making a move to harm me. It was just staring, as puzzled by my presence as I was by its. Breaking the tense silence, the cryptid issued a low sound, more akin to a murmur than a growl, an ambiguous noise, neither welcoming nor threatening. With one last lingering look, the creature began to back away, each step deliberate as it descended the stairs. My eyes stayed glued to its body until it was swallowed by the darkness of the night. As the door settled back into its frame with a soft creak, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My body felt like a bundle of frayed nerves, my legs shaky, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions. That's when the realization washed over me, as clear and startling as a bolt of lightning. The rules I'd found, the ones I'd so cavalierly chosen to break one by one, were not mere tales meant to scare the new recruit. They were a carefully constructed set of guidelines, a framework that allowed for the delicate coexistence of human and creature. After that night, my perspective underwent a fundamental change. The thrill of defying the rules and probing the unknown was replaced by a sobering understanding of why those rules existed. I had thought they were just about human safety, a way to protect the new guy on the job. I was wrong. These rules were a complex framework designed for the well-being of all the forest's inhabitants. So, I made a conscious decision to adhere to them, my compliance driven not by fear, but by respect for the intricate balance of life my previous actions had thrown into disarray. Once I started obeying the rules, the environment around me transformed. The forest exuded a sense of peace and harmony I hadn't sensed before. Had the forest always had this serene atmosphere, and my actions disturbed it, or was this a new development, a direct result of my altered behavior? The cryptid appeared to recognize and respond to my change in attitude. Gone were the eerie footsteps up the stairs in the dead of night. The radio remained silent, devoid of inexplicable interference or mysterious calls, and the sightings of shadowy figures among the trees ceased. It was as if the cryptid was acknowledging my newfound respect for the rules and responding in kind. We had reached an unspoken agreement, a mutual understanding that neither of us would cross the boundaries that allowed us to coexist. As the days stretched into weeks, the sense of peace that had settled over the forest showed no signs of dissipating. The absence of eerie occurrences, the tranquility of the surroundings, and the muted activities of the forest creatures all affirmed that this was the natural state of things. This equilibrium was how the forest was meant to be, the environment where both the cryptid and I could coexist without conflict. While the cryptid had ceased its more overt activities, it was not entirely invisible. Periodically, usually around dusk when the sky took on the warm, muted colors of twilight, I would spot it, always at a respectful distance. It would appear among the trees, momentarily visible in the fading sunlight. These sightings were never prolonged, more like brief check-ins, a way for the creature to affirm that the equilibrium we'd established was still in place. The most remarkable moment came about a month later. I was sitting in the tower, lost in a book, when I heard a soft rustle outside the window. Glancing out, I saw the cryptid standing at the edge of the clearing, closer than it had ever been since our confrontation, yet I felt no fear. Our eyes met, and the creature gave what could only be described as a nod before turning and disappearing into the forest. That was the moment I knew for sure we had reached an understanding, a mutual respect that transcended words or explanations. As the days on the calendar dwindled, I couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. My time in the fire lookout tower was coming to an end, and the reality was sinking in. On my last night, the forest seemed unusually still, as if aware that a chapter was closing. I sat there in the quiet, reflecting on the encounters, the rules, and the enigmatic creature that had been both a source of fear and a teacher of great lessons. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, I heard it, footsteps on the stairs, the familiar sequence of creaks and thuds that had once filled me with dread. This time, however, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I didn't need to look. I knew what this meant. True to the rule I had once broken, I didn't turn my head to see who or what was there. Instead, I focused on the radio equipment that had sat silently on the desk for so many nights. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, lingered for a moment, then retreated, fading into the depth of the night. The next morning, as I prepared to leave, I felt a sense of peace envelop me. I packed my belongings, took one last look around the tower that had been my home, and began my descent. Each step felt heavy, weighed down not by regret, but by the gravity of the experiences I was carrying with me. I had done my part, upheld my end of the agreement, maintained the balance of the forest, and in doing so honored the unique relationship that had formed between me and the creature. As I reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped into the clearing, the forest seemed to greet me with a serene silence. I took a moment to breathe it all in. I didn't see the cryptid that morning, but I didn't need to. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel that this experience would stay with me forever, shaping my understanding of the world in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. Now, reader, I pose a question to you. If you were to return to a place from your childhood, a place filled with memories both joyous and haunting, would you dare to step back into its shadows, knowing what might be waiting? And if you found yourself face to face with the unknown, would you have the courage to look, or the wisdom to turn away? The choice, as always, is yours, but some doors, once opened, can never be closed again.